February 19, 1942. The president's signature marked the end of 126,000 Japanese Americans' freedom. Japanese Americans were presented a flyer in which they were to be relocated into camps. Having only what they could carry, many were desperate to sell their property or to leave it in the care of someone else. Nobody really knew how long they would be in these relocation centers. Once they arrived, they were separated into barracks, kept in long, tall barbed wire, and surrounded by soldiers with guns. And only until June 25, 1946, was Executive Order 9742 put into action, allowing Japanese Americans to finally leave the incarceration camps. But the trauma doesn't end there. Many Japanese Americans wanted to leave everything that happened to them in the camps and start a new life. They wanted to be the most American they could ever be. But the trauma and damage was already done. 83 years later, we are reliving a parallel of the past. President Donald Trump signed orders giving ICE sweeping power to conduct raids across the country, echoing the mass removal of people based not on crime but on identity. Families were torn apart, communities were silenced, rights were ignored, legal status didn't matter. What happened to Japanese Americans in 1942 is not just history, it is a warning, and now we're watching it happen again.
I turned the home, turned on the radio, then I heard the words, this is the real thing, this is war. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor.
In its determination to fight and win the war thrust upon it, and to win the peace that will follow. The Japs copied their German masters in striking hard at airfields, Hickhamville, northwest of Honolulu.
After Pearl Harbor, everything changed. In Hawaii, the military took control. Japanese Americans were arrested in the middle of the night. No trial, no charges. Honolulu, Manzanar, Tule Lake, these became home to thousands, but they weren't homes. They were prisons, surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards.
She simply packed California-type clothing, nothing especially warm for northern weather. It was ordinary type California clothing that we took with us. Searched by the armed guards escorting us. From that point on, we were under constant guards watching us, getting on the bus, took us to the trains that first took us to Pomona in Southern California as our temporary assembly center. Never telling us where we were going. They didn't tell us we were going to Pomona. They didn't tell us our ultimate destination is Heart Mountain. It was a tough time not knowing what's going to happen to us.
This wasn't about safety. It was about race, about suspicion and fear. When the war ended, survivors came back to find their homes gone, their businesses stolen, their trust in America shattered. In 1988, the government finally apologized. President Reagan said it was caused by, quote, racial prejudice, war hysteria, and the failure of political leadership. But an apology doesn't erase pain. The trauma lives on, quiet but heavy.
Oh my God! Señor, su cumpleaños!
President Trump stated, "We're going to remove millions." Days later, ICE raids begin. Agents show up at dawn, knocking on doors, taking parents while their kids are still asleep.
Yeah, well, I grew up in LA. I'm from Pico Union, and so I think I've always been a huge advocate for my community. I think it's a huge injustice of what's going on. People people are being targeted based on the color of their skin, what language they speak, or like where they're working at. And so I think just any human being with a heart knows that's like huge injustice. And well, my family is mixed status, so I think that also was like, it's been a little more difficult just because, you know, I'm also afraid of like family member being taken. People aren't coming out to work, the vendors, you know, they're risking their lives basically to come out, but, you know, out of necessity and like survival to be able to pay their rent, we are seeing that they're coming out, or maybe they're like not coming out as much, and the impact that's been happening. Unfortunately, they took two people, but it was really like amazing to see the resistance that the community had. Like people outside of their homes came out, people that were like walking by, and everyone that had heard about the news, they all just came out and to really like stop them from taking more people.
This is the reality of today, a reality that reflects the same fear, same division, the same injustice Japanese Americans experienced decades ago. The names have changed, but the pattern hasn't. In 1942, families were taken because they looked like the enemy. Today, it's their language, their birthplace, the way they look. Then and now, fear gave the government a pass, and silence let it happen. In MacArthur Park, everybody already has a network to alert when ICE is nearby. Communities come together fast, protecting each other because no one else will. In both moments, communities were labeled a threat without evidence. People were treated as problems instead of people. And now we see the same systems, mass detention, no due process, and quiet acceptance by those not affected. But this time, we've learned something. We've created legal workshops. We've taught families their rights. We built safety networks. We said, we won't let fear win. This is more than just a repeat. It's proof that history left warnings we ignored. We thought this couldn't happen again, but it is. The silence that followed Japanese incarceration allowed it to happen in the first place. Today, we must break that silence. This isn't just about the past versus the present. It's about recognizing the patterns, government overreach, and community fear, and people pushed into shadows. But we can break the cycle. Stand with your neighbors. Share the stories. Speak out. To the Japanese American community, your history is a warning and a reminder. It gives us power to say, never again. To everyone watching, don't wait until it's too late. History doesn't live in books. It lives in what we do next.